Are we on here? Yes. Hi, everybody. If I can get your attention just for the last session of the afternoon, this is it. We're in the home stretch. I'm going to introduce Scott Badish. He's going to come up to get us to home plate. We were just talking about baseball a minute ago. He's going to give us some hints on how to get your voice heard. Advocacy, that's what we're all about today, so thanks.
Thank you. First I want to thank everyone. This has been real educational for me and insightful. It's wonderful to sit and be with people who care. Unfortunately, it's uncommon in life, but it's wonderful to be with you. And if people don't say it to you directly, I want to say it to you, thank you. I know you're advocating for people like my son and so many others. So bless you and keep it going. This is my son, who's a UNC fan, even though he never went to UNC, which is a discussion. This is at a baseball game we went to, the Washington Nationals, and the other is at Chicago after we watched my grandson's soccer. 4-year-old kids playing soccer, which is just a wonderful experience. Especially when they're all going different ways, and my grandson is sitting there playing some game on his thing. But in my son, anytime I speak about my son, he gives me permission to speak. And what I was trying to do today is go through this and try to think. You haven't been now retired 5 years and kind of away from the day-to-day grind of everything. You know, what could I be doing to be the best dad, and what can my wife and I be as the best parents to help Evan, but also with me having time in retirement, what could I do to help other people from whatever little knowledge is up here. And I walked around today and I thought it was exciting and thrilling. I think from listening to Liz, who's like my hero. But I was sitting there thinking, how what Liz was saying was really affecting me as a person. My wife had foot surgery on October 1st, and she's immobile for 6 months. And I'm a caretaker. And I realized everyone in the world in caretaking, no one asked me what I wanted. You go to the doctor, and the doctor says, okay, here's all that's going to happen afterwards. But wait, what about me? And I realized I never advocated and said, stop. You know, you want me to be the best caretaker, because if I'm not, she's coming, you know, she's not going to get well. But no one ever said, here's resources available, here's how to help. And I know from my work before I was tired, there's a lot of people involved in caretaking. And some may be caretaker, but no one had ever asked me. So I love when she said about how do you advocate for yourself? I realized I got to do a better job of that. And sometimes some of the solutions are hard, some are easy. But what I wanted, and Liz and I had some other stuff, we ran out of time. When I advocate, I try to get mad. And I'll tell you the two things I always go in before I advocate. And it's, in North Carolina, Raleigh, RDU Airport, which is a great airport, I love it. They're building a new runway that they need. I don't understand it, but they need it, and I believe it. And a new runway is over $1 billion. That's what it is today. God knows what it'll be in 10 years. And they justify it by saying we need another runway because in 5 years or 10 years, we're going to have more planes landing and taking off. And we don't want people to wait. Then I just heard there's close to 4,000 people on a waiting list in North Carolina for a waiver. That's not important. Those people waiting 9, 10 years for it, that's not as important as the person who's waiting on a plane to take off in less than 10 minutes. Well, it's $1 billion, and when you ask the legislature, how could you spend $1 billion for this? Well, it's different money. It's not different money, it's taxpayer money. They've decided where to put it. So one of my thoughts is when I go in there, I kind of want to say, wait, This is my taxpayer money. My taxes go up. I don't like how you're spending them. And it's back to what Liz said, that we're the boss of those people. So sometimes I've learned in advocacy that a no just means not now. I never have accepted a no. And I've consistently said, it's got to be better. So what I would like each of you to do when you advocate for your son, for your daughter, for your whomever, for yourself, think of that story that says, wait, how could you do this? But you can't do this for my son or me or betterment of a community. The second thing is, I ask you to keep this quiet. Elected officials tend not to make the best decisions. Now, don't tell anyone that, because I could get in trouble. And I'll give you an example. When I was in Florida, they wanted to build a new stadium for the Miami Dolphins. No, they were an okay team. And they wanted to build skyboxes. So they wanted to give tax incentives to people to buy skyboxes. And they said that was a great economic impact. Every single study done about skybox says it's the worst economic impact. That don't buy this. The best impact in Florida, South Florida at the time, was to invest in early childhood development. That was the best economic benefit. So in a purely sense way, if you're advocating, this is something you want. You advocate for kids for early childhood development, particularly kids with disabilities. Every study shows it's the best thing to help them along their way. And they'll need less services down the road. But more importantly, if you fund services for those kids, that money stays in the community and replicates, and it's tax dollars. So when you pay the home health nurse or worker, she goes to McDonald's, who then hires the person at McDonald's who goes to Wendy's, and it's constantly turning over. The skybox goes to, all the money goes to the Cayman Islands, goes to investments. It stays out of the community. So I asked myself, well, why? That's crazy. Well, we know why. Because the people who come to want the skyboxes are playing a game in Congress that we don't play. We don't have that kind of cash to give. We don't have that kind of votes. So part of it is on a macro level, how does the disability community advocate together? And one thing I saw, and Liz would say the same, is the advocates, at least in the autism community, they'll kill their young. They just never work together. Because you'll have some, and they're all well-meaning. But just imagine if we were able to garner all the support of all the people with disabilities, their parents, you're talking 30, 40 million people. That's a voting block. That's a voting block that wouldn't stop Medicaid, it wouldn't stop food stamps, and in the state of North Carolina, it would fund the 4,000 slots. So when you're asking, some of it is to interpret this and see what's really happening and why are they saying no. So it's a great answer to say, well, I agree with you, Scott, but there's no money. Look at a budget in government, there's money. The other thing, you know, Laura asked me to say, to encourage you to do one thing that you learned from today to make something better. And what I've always done, and I mentioned about my son, who's my real hero, because he's taught me more than anyone in the world. I used to take him, on the autism side, we'd have a day on the Hill, and all these volunteers, maybe 300, 400 volunteers would come in and advocate. And he would come with me. And I'll never forget, it was with Senator Tillis. We were meeting, and all the professionals are saying, this is what we need, this is what, and Senator Tillis turns to Evan and says, what do you want? He says, these guys don't know what they're talking about. And I'm looking, I said, Evan, this is my job. You know, this is how we pay our rent. But no one had, even myself, no one had asked him, if you're going to meet with Senator Tillis, what do you want? And what he wanted was a job. And he then said to Tillis, I can't get a job because there's too much discrimination. And the discrimination isn't so much about people not hiring me, I can't get through an interview. And we were all saying, well, you need more money, you need this. He was saying at a basic necessity, I wanted a job. And then all of a sudden I watched Tillis talk to him, like kind of just not listening to us. And when we walked, Tillis's aide came out, and I gave him my card. He goes, "Now I want your son's card." And my son doesn't have a card, but now he does. He actually has a card. But he realized that sometimes we speak way beyond what they may want. Now, he may not recognize that he needs housing and he needs all this stuff, but he was sensible enough to think, if I get a job, I could do this, then I could get this and this. And we were just saying, wasn't there. So the ability, what I've learned is to not go to those meetings anymore and just have my son go. Because I was following it up for him and for anyone like him. The other thing is, and this is not a criticism, I think I said in a couple of sessions today, I thought they were phenomenal. I was thinking about affordable housing, and in the session I went to, I don't know the number, was you have to make like $27 an hour to afford rent. And I know I live in Chapel Hill, and anytime you turn around, there's apartments going up, and they're allegedly affordable. Well, they're affordable to someone who, and it's their right to happen. We need our teachers to live here, our cops, and that's great. But $1,000 is not affordable to our kids or to ourselves. So we're having a discussion in Chapel Hill and around America about affordability, but we're not recognizing, wait, there's a whole disability community there. I just got out of a session where I heard all the numbers of North Carolina, and God love the professionals doing that. What we're not talking about is how many people don't sign up for the waiver because they don't know about it, or they realize it's 5 years. In Texas, there's 450,000 people on the waiver. If you're 450,000, you ain't gonna ever see services. So they just don't go. So we don't bring those up. If you talk to most people, they don't know that. So part of what I would suggest is sometimes is to say, wait, you do it over here, why aren't you doing it here? How do you get your kids to vote? Are your kids voters? My son's a voter, you know, and that's important. But you want them to say they're active people in the community. The other thing is, we're living in a real strange time now because everything's changing. When I was working with the congressman, it was just the beginning of the bill that the Big Beautiful or Big Ugly bill, whatever people call it, started. And there was tremendous questions about Medicaid. People were calling the congressman's office, the calls were coming to me, we're cutting, this is going to affect my kid. But the people that were being listened to were the hospitals because they were saying we were going to lose money, which they were. But the reality is the voice of ours who just said I needed services, when I go to the doctor, I want to be able to get cared for. There's no money for that. So recognizing what your competition is and how you compete with that. Please note, the affordable health care issue to me is an issue that we should be much more involved in as a community. Because it affects all our kids, and if you're not healthy, you're going to need more services and more services and more services. But in the affordable, in the halls of Congress, you'd be amazed how little advocacy effort is made on affordable housing compared to the doctors and the hospitals and all the special interests. So choosing where you could be most effective, to me, is really important. A couple other things. I would ask all those of you who are professionals, because I was one, and I don't understand your language. I did 4 years ago, and I was one of those who was fluent in that language. Make it easy to understand. Make it so I can understand when you say 3 letters, I know what you're talking about. When I was with Chris Smith, Congressman, he and I talk one day, and I showed him, my wife got a letter from Social Security. And he couldn't understand it, I couldn't understand it, no one could understand it. So we came up with an idea. We said, why don't we encourage Social Security and Medicare and CMS to write letters so that an 8th grader could read it. It would be easier to send a man to Mars than to get them to change that. They told me every single reason why they couldn't do it. Never saying to me, well, yeah, this makes sense. Never recognizing that when I read the booklet, I have no idea, so I make the phone call, and there's a cost. Just tell me how to get on the damn thing. You know, when I had to switch my son from SSI to SDI, here I was the head of the Autism Society of America. I did not know how to do it. And that says me, but it became too complicated. People who apply for SSI, who put a word in there they're not supposed to put in. Like the question when they said, could your son or daughter ever work? And you say, I hope so. Well, there it's gone. So how do you educate it so that you at least start with a good understanding of the phrase? And I guess the last thing I want to mention is when I was amazed in working, if you all have a chance, you got to go work for elected official. Do it as a volunteer, because they really do care. But what I was amazed at was how some people came in and like, I demand that you do this. Or if you, threatening right at the front. If you don't do this, we're gonna let everyone know that you didn't do this. And you're saying, well, wait, what is it you want? And so the ability to recognize that that person is getting hit from all sides, and how do you come to a compromise on that is real important. Liz and I were going to talk a little more about the whole concept of compromising. When do you compromise? When do you say we want a little to get a lot? If you look at interesting, those of you in the autism community, you know, there's a big split between profound autism, which certain people don't even like the word profound, and lack of other words, a higher functioning, a person who could be more like my son who works and lives on his own. And if you watch the profound group, I'm very impressed by how they're compromising. They realize they can't get it all in 1 year. It may take 20 years, but they're quietly moving along in a way that's not causing them friction. So how do you work with that? How do you work with other groups? I want to thank you all again for educating me. I've gotten real involved. And my last pitch, sit down because this is important. He mentioned that I'm a fundraiser, so I don't care. Think about this. We need 190, and I'm not going to pass the bucket around, although if any of you have money, you could bring it up here. We need $197,000 to build, what, 12 units? Or yes. 12 units of housing. $5 billion for runway. You know, God knows, we could all mention that. How do we, one of the things I'm going to be working on is getting that, because it's not only the concept of getting the money, it's the concept of telling people this is good money spent. This is money that's going to help people and save people, but more importantly, it's not only going to help the individual, it's going to help the individual's family, it's going to be a benefit to the community. We know that anytime you put those programs in communities, the community prospers. How do you do that? But we're sitting there worried that we're going to have to let go of a project because we can't find $197,000. That's the fight we have. So again, if you know anyone who's rich, if you played the lottery this weekend and won, we'll be happy to take some of that money. But just think about it, that it's your money, it's your kid, it's you, it's your neighbor that you're trying to help. So thank you again for everything you guys have done.
Thanks, Scott. All right. Let me be clear, we're not letting that project go either, just so you know. Weavers Grove is going on. All right, that's it. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everybody, so much for attending today. Just a couple things on your way out the door. First of all, there's a survey. It was in your swag bag this morning, so you can fill it out via paper if you're old school. There's a QR code in the bottom corner that'll take you to a link. That same link is on the website for the Housing Summit. Please let us know how we did. Please let us know how we can be more effective. Okay, this is Housing Summit number 4. Attendance is fantastic. There was a lot of good conversation today, and I think a lot of people got inspired to do certain things. We want to do that bigger and better next year. So help us out with that and fill out this survey. If you know anybody associated with our sponsors, please thank them. Sponsors make it all possible. So we're really appreciative to all the sponsors here. But with that, I'm going to conclude our 4th Housing Summit for Hope, North Carolina. Hope to see you all next year. Thanks.